My name is Debbie Barnett, and welcome to MahjCon Presents live stream series part 9. I can't believe that I've done this now for 9 months. That's crazy. If you don't know me already, I'm all about Mahjong. I'm a little bit of a crazy Mahjong fanatic, you might want to say. And I love doing events in person and online. And this is one of the online events that I do monthly, and I try to do something different each month. Tonight is going to be all about transitioning from online to in-person play. I'm going to be showing you little video clips, and they are all pieces of a video series that I had done. So they're, some of it may be a little awkward, but I think the point of everything that I need to share with you is going to be fine. But you'll see what I mean, because I took pieces and cuts out of this big, huge 14 video series. After each video, what I would like to do is stop and answer any questions that you have or any additional questions that you might have, so we can tackle each of these points right after we watch the video. Now, interestingly enough, and this isn't all of it, I know that there are a few other things that belong on this list, but this, and by the way, if you want this infographic, you can just email me after and I'll send it to you. This is really, if you look at this, these are the things on the left side here that we don't do in an online platform. On an online platform, it sounds a little awkward, that we do have to do when we're in person. And I know that many people learned how to play this game during COVID and have continued to play this game online and haven't yet ventured out to playing with people or in groups. And of course, if you feel intimidated about it, or you're not quite ready to do that, you don't know what the in-person experience is going to be like, sure, it can be very intimidating. So hopefully this will help clear up any confusion you have or uncertainty that you have surrounding the differences. And we're going to go through each one of these. So if you want this infographic, I could send you the PDF or JPEG of it, whatever works for you. It's just interesting how many things we don't do online that we have to do in person. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, now the videos, most of them are short. There's a couple of them that are longer. I did allow for an hour and a half for this presentation. We probably will not go over, but I just want to let you know some of them are much shorter than others. Some of them are a little more involved. So let's start out by playing this first one. I'm just going to let it play, listen to it with you, and then once we're done, I'll pause and we'll open this up for questions. Before we start to play the game, we need to set up the tiles and build the walls. So the first thing that you do is everybody will share in turning over the tiles so that they are face down. This goes a lot quicker when there are 4 people doing this. Once all the tiles are face down, everybody will share in mixing the tiles to make sure that if you'd already played a game, there are no groupings of multiple tiles sitting together and ending up in the same spot in the wall tiles. Of course, having 4 sets of hands is more than enough. If everybody were to be mixing all at the same time, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, especially if someone has long nails. So Having about 2 people at any given time mixing is more than enough. Once the mixing is done, everybody builds their walls as follows. There will be 19 tiles across, and then 2 tiers. So you will have 2 layers of 19 tiles across. And each person is doing this at the same time. You will verify that you have 19 because everybody's racks are a little different in length, and you want to be sure that if you have one of the shorter racks that you have enough tiles here. So you simply would count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19. And I have 19, as you can see. Before I go on to building the other walls, I do want to mention something to you. And I'll just reverse this right here. Okay. I've got one tier already built here. Now, you don't want to build your wall one tile at a time. Everybody's going to be taking a nap if you do that, and people do want to get on and play the game. So instead of doing it one tile at a time, grab 2 or 3, and do it. Or you can use 2 hands and do your building. That just helps speed it up because everybody is anxious to get on with the game. Now I'm going to build the walls for everybody else. I also want to mention that after you build your wall, you could run your hand right over the front of it, and that will straighten out any uneven tiles that you have. Now, as you can see, everybody has their walls built, 19 across and 2 tiers for each one of the players. Okay, are there any questions about this part? I think everybody's good on that one.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so here's the next one. We've got determining who is east, breaking the wall, the deal, verifying the number of tiles you have before the deal and before east discards, and racking the tiles. We're going to start out this lesson by determining who the east player is. And the east player is the player that begins the game. So let's go ahead and start by rolling the dice. Now I have thrown a 9. The next player will roll the dice in a counterclockwise motion. So player 2, who is to my right, will roll the dice as well. And then it will continue around the table, again in a counterclockwise motion or to the right. And the next player will roll, and then the next player will roll. Whoever has the highest roll on the dice becomes the east player. So let's say I rolled a 7 and I'm the east player. The first thing you want to do is pick up the dice from the table and move them over just by the next player, who will be east's rack. This indicates to them that they are now the next player who will be rolling the dice to break the wall. All right, so we have rolled a 7 on the dice, and now it's time to break the wall. Breaking the wall in Mahjong is very much like splitting a deck of cards. It prevents cheating. And I'm not going to go over how one cheats in Mahjong, but trust me when I say that cheating does go on in almost every game including Mahjong. So this breaking the wall does prevent that, as I said, just as it's done in cards. Now, what I'm going to do now that I have pushed out my entire wall is I am going to count out 7 tiles, including the top and bottom tiers here. And I'm going to show you several ways to do this break, and then you will eventually adapt to your own style of breaking the wall. 2, 4, 6, 7. There is the break in the wall, and these are the tiles that we pull back and hold. Now, if you hold the tiles with a little bit of light pressure on both ends, they will easily move. If you grab the tiles like this, the chances are they're going to collapse on you. So make sure that that doesn't happen, because then it's going to be challenging getting them right in the same order from where they came. All right, so hold them like this, a little bit of pressure, and pull them back. That's one way to do the break. Another way to do the break is to count the tiles out right from where they sit by your rack, in front of your rack. So you pull them out a little bit, and then you could go 2, 4, 6, 7. And then you could do the same thing that we did before by putting a little bit of pressure on the tiles and moving them very carefully to the center of the table. All right, I'll show you another way. All right, so the same thing would apply if you wanted to push them out. And instead of separating them out the way I did originally, you could then pull back 2, 4, 6, and 7. And you could do it that way. And I'm going to show you one more way. I want you to have all the ways that I've seen it done, and I'm sure there's probably some I'm not going to get to, but nonetheless, these are the most common. Okay, so the next one would be you push it out a little bit, and you hold back your 7, 2, 4, 6, 7, and then these tiles are moved out of the way, and the rest of the tiles are pushed out by using the actual rack. All right, and then you have to put these tiles back in place exactly how they came. Now I want you to note something right now. This is very important. When you break the wall, the tiles that are counted out from the dice that are your break in the wall come back and sit exactly where they came from. To the right, this is exactly how they came from. And I'm going to explain to you why this is important. Well, first of all, the most important thing of all to me is that this is where they came from, so this is where they belong. The second thing is that when we pick tiles from the wall and push out additional tiles, it goes in a clockwise motion or to the left. So we pick to the right in Mahjong and we push out the wall tiles to the left. With this opening here, it's a nice little lead-in to remind us of which way we're going to be pushing the walls. Okay, so that is the reason why it is important to leave the tiles right where they are. When you start playing with other players, you're going to start to see that there are a lot of things that are done differently. because people were taught differently. Maybe they weren't taught the right way, or they weren't taught at all and they've learned it themselves. Regardless of what it is, we can't change how everybody else does things, but you can learn the right way and you could do it the right way. So if you are to see somebody's tiles sitting here or sitting here, you'll know that it's supposed to be done this way. All right, now that the wall is broken and you have an idea of the different ways to do the break, it's time for the tiles to get dealt out or dealt in, however you want to refer to it. But I do want to mention that in Mahjong, dealing is not the same as in a card game. In a card game, you have a dealer who deals all of the cards out for the other players, and that is required of the dealer. In Mahjong, the dealer is the individual player. So everybody picks in their own tiles. And yes, it's still called a deal, and picks their own tiles. So I'm going to pick my first two. And let me show you that again. First two, they are picked in groupings of 4 tiles, 2 from the top and 2 from the bottom. We pick tiles during the game counterclockwise to the right, and it's the same way when the deal is done. The next player will pick their 4 tiles, and the next player will pick their 4, and it continues around. When it gets back to the East player, who is the starting player for not only starting the deal, but for discarding their first tile, East will then take another set of 4 tiles. All right, now we've run out of wall tiles on the table. So how do we push them out? We push them out to the left. And to the left is clockwise. All right, now the next player will take their tiles, and now we continue on until we get back to East again. Now East will take another set of 4, and it will continue around until we get back to East again. And now East has 3 sets of 4 for a total of 12 tiles. East has the advantage of having 1 more tile to start with than the others, and this was mentioned in the previous lesson. So for East to pick those 2 tiles, the way it is done is they take the first and the third tiles. I'm going to show you, everybody always says, well, why do they do it that way? And most often you're going to hear, because that's the way it's done. But I'm going to show you why it's done that way, and it's pretty much a shortcut. So hang on, and I want to go ahead and deal out the rest of the tiles to everybody else, and then I'm going to go back and repeat that so you could see why East takes the first and third tiles. Okay, so now the next player to the right takes their 13th tile from the first available, which was on the bottom, and the next, and the next. All right, now we have 14 tiles for East, 13 for each of the other players. All right, now if we reverse that and start out again, if East were to take 1 tile and this player take the second tile, the next tile for their 13th, and the next player takes their next tile for 13, and finally this tile, the next tile for East to take is the top one here, which actually ends up being the first and third tile. All right, so that's why that is done like that. It's just a little bit of a shortcut. And I'm going to go ahead and do that first and third again and deal out the last tile to everybody. Alrighty, there we go. Beautiful. Everybody's got their tiles in. And before we move on, I want to mention that before the tiles are put up on everybody's rack, it is important that all players verify that they have the correct number of tiles. And this is why we leave them in the groupings on the top of our card until that is done. Once you've verified you have the right number of tiles, we can move on to the next step. And now it is time to what we call rack our tiles. And racking our tiles is merely putting them up on the rack, and it would be, this part of the rack is called the sloped part of the rack. Sorry about that one section where there's the text box. I couldn't finagle that when I separated out this video, but if you have any questions right now about this part, please go ahead and unmute and let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, I have a question. In any game I've ever played, even in a tournament, after we roll for east, we roll again to see where to break the wall.
Either one is acceptable. Either way is acceptable. There's nothing in writing about whether or not you have to take the roll that is initially done or roll again. So that's a personal choice or a group choice, and either one is acceptable. My groups, we also roll again, but a lot of them just take, and the person who rolled the highest number is the one who breaks it by that number. But good point, Phyllis. Just so everybody knows, either way is acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody have any more questions about any of this process? Okay, good. Then we'll just go ahead and move right on. The next section is going to be the Charleston. This is another thing that the computer does for us. And so we're going to go ahead and watch the Charleston process. The Charleston is broken up into a first Charleston and a second Charleston, and then finally an optional across pass. The first Charleston consists of the first right, an across, and the first left. So we're going to go ahead and start out with the first right. And everybody will pass 3 tiles that they don't want to the player on the right. Okay, now everybody's passed. And everybody can pick up their tiles and put them in their rack. Now the next move is the across move. Across is done like this. And then I will get 3 players from this opponent. This player will put 3 here. And this player will put 3 here. And that's how it works on the inside of the walls, and just like that. All right, so then everybody can pick up their tiles and rack them. And now we're on the first left, which is the last move of the first 3 passes of the first Charleston. There's several things to talk about with this first left. If someone wants to stop the Charleston after the first 3 passes, which the first Charleston consists of, they can do so. Anybody can stop the Charleston before the second left is done. And if someone stops it, it stops for everyone, and then everyone would proceed to the optional across pass, which is still done. What's important to know about stopping the Charleston is that your intentions need to be announced during the first left. And the reason is because experienced Mahjong players are very quick. Should they receive a second left and pick it up, it will be too late to stop the Charleston. So I say something like this: go slow after the first left, I might want to stop it. And you could come up with your own words, but those are the words that I use in order to alert everybody that once the first left is done, nobody touch their tiles. Now, why would we want to stop the Charleston? Well, we would want to stop the Charleston because we don't have 3 tiles to pass. We actually got in such great tiles for our hands that we do not have 3 tiles to give up. But if you have 3 tiles to give up, you should continue. That's the smart way to play. And why would you want to continue? Because you have an opportunity to get in tiles on all of the rest of the moves. So it would be a second left, another across, a last right, and an optional. So that would be 3, 6, 9, potentially 12 tiles for you to get out of your hand and then get in 12 tiles to potentially look at and use toward your hand. In this particular case, I would continue because I do have 3 tiles to pass. Okay, now the other thing about the first left is that you can do a blind pass. A blind pass means that if you do not have 3 tiles to pass and you only have 2, you would put the 2 tiles here that you do have, and when you get your first left from the player on your right, you take one of the 3, it doesn't matter which, but you don't look at it. That's why it's called the blind pass. You take any one of those and add it to the 3 that you're giving, and then you would pick up your tiles. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the first left for everybody else. First left here, and first left here. That's what the first left looks like. All right, so now that we've passed everything on, we can rack our tiles, and this player can rack their tiles, and this player can rack their tiles, and this player can rack their tiles. That's the first 3 moves of the Charleston. We're going to now move on to the second Charleston, which comprises of the second left, another across, otherwise referred to as a must across. And the reason they refer to it as a must across is because the next across that comes up will be the optional across. So that just helps differentiate it. And finally, the third move of the second Charleston, which is the last right. So let's go ahead and get started with the second Charleston and the second left. When passing the second left, it is advisable to stack them just like this in a little pyramid. I'm going to go ahead and pass for everybody else as well. All right, if you're already thinking about why we stack the Charleston into a pyramid like this, as some people say, take 2 tiles and put a hat on it. The reason is because there are 2 lefts that follow each other, the first left and the second left. This is a very, very nice reminder that you are on the second left. It is also an indication that you are starting the second Charleston and the second left. So this will be the second left that we're performing. Now everybody's past their second left, so we could go ahead and pick the tiles up. Now keep in mind, not everybody waits for all the tiles to be passed before they pick them up. And this is one of the reasons why it is so very important to let everybody know on the first left that you may be thinking about stopping the Charleston. So if, let's say, for example, I had said, hold up, I'm thinking about whether I want to continue the Charleston, then somebody would say to me more than likely, well, are you gonna go? And I, at that point, would either say, I think I'm gonna stop it, or I would say, we can continue. And that's how it's done, simply like that. And this is important to mention. When it comes to stopping the Charleston, there should be no questions asked about why you're stopping it, although you've been taught what the right reasons are to stop it. It is not a requirement to let anybody know why you've made that decision. All right, so now everybody's going to be able to wrap their tiles. Now we're going to go ahead and do the second pass of the second Charleston, which is the across move. And again, as I mentioned, also referred to as the must across. So we're going to go ahead and take 3 tiles and we're going to pass them just like this inside the walls. And everybody is going to do the same. Just like that. All right, now everybody's passed. Everybody can pick up their across. And now we're on the last move of the second Charleston, which is the last right. And the way the last right is done is like this, to the right. No stacking, no capping, no pyramid. Just like this. Now, this is a good one because this pass is also a pass in which you can do your blind pass. So remember, first left and last right. The blind passes are the last move of each the first Charleston and the second Charleston. Eventually, you won't have to think about it. First left, last right. So the way that will work is if I have only 1 tile to pass, I am going to wait for the tiles to come in from the receiving player, and I am going to take the 1 tile that I have to pass, take any 2 of the tiles, add it to mine, and pass them on without looking, because this is a blind pass. The reason it was named a blind pass is because you do this blindly without looking at the tiles. Now, if you are wondering why you don't look at them, well, you don't look at them because these tiles that you've taken from this player were not your tiles to begin with. So if you peek at them, you're going to see the tiles that you're passing on. So you're going to know what the receiving player of your tiles is going to get in their hand. And let's just say you looked at them and you place them down with the tile you looked at in the middle, and the receiving player picked up that middle tile and placed it amongst their tiles. It would be very telling. It would more than likely mean
that they are using a 7 die.
All right, so that is, so let's go ahead and back that up. Now I want to show you what would happen if I had no tiles to pass, because you can pass 0, 1, 2, or 3. But if I had no tiles to pass, that would mean that I had Mahjong after the Charleston. And the name for that is having an earthly hand. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And it's an incredible experience if you're ever able to experience it. So if I have Mahjong, I would have no tiles to pass. And since I have 14 tiles in my hand right now, and I was east, indicated by the break in the wall, then I would just simply take their pass and move it on like this. But let me go ahead and put everybody else's first right out. And now I am going to move all of these on. Guess what I get to announce? So if that were to occur and I had Mahjong sitting on my rack, I would display them like this. And I would say very excitedly, Mahjong. And of course at that point you're going to hear oohs and ahs and wows and great job and I can't believe it from everybody sitting around the table, because it is a rarity to have a earthly hand after the Charleston. So we need to talk about the last pass, which is the optional across. Now I have done a blind pass with all 3 tiles, and now it's time to do the optional across. So the way the optional across works is that the 2 players opposite each other negotiate how many tiles are to be passed, if you want to pass any at all. So it's called optional because you have a choice. So these 2 players here would talk to each other and say, how many tiles do you want? I have 3. And if the other player said I only have 2, then 2 is what gets passed. So the player with the lower number of tiles to pass is the one that prevails with how many tiles are passed on the optional. In my particular case, when the player across from me says, how many would you like? And I say none, you're probably going to hear a little bit of a remark like, oh, wow, none? They're not going to know that you're going to be displaying a Mahjong, but nonetheless, they're going to know that something good is going on. Now, if I were to say, when they asked me, how many tiles do you have to pass? And if I were to say 1, the smart thing to do, and this is a little bit of strategy for you, a little bit of beginner strategy actually, if I say I have 1 tile to pass, the smart thing for the player across from me to say would be, no, thank you. Now, why would they say no, thank you? Well, they would say no, thank you, because if I only have 1 tile to pass, that is a strong indication that I have something very good going on my rack.
And if the player that you're doing the optional across with stopped the Charleston, it is also another good indication that they have one very strong hand. Before we end Lesson 9, I want to leave you with a story and a mnemonic to help you remember the Charleston moves. Ralph and Larry just loved to do the Charleston with their partners. But one thing about Ralph and Larry is that the first 3 initials of Ralph, R-A-L, actually represent the first 3 moves of the Charleston, the first right, across, and the first left. And it just so happens that brother Larry's first 3 initials, L-A-R, represent the second Charleston, second left, across, and last right. And then, of course, we're left with the optional across pass. This will be an easy way for you to remember the Charleston moves. Think about the story of Ralph and Larry, and you'll have no problems remembering RALNLAR.
No? Great. Okay. We're going to move on to picking and discarding in person. I am going to start discarding because I am East. And so I am going to discard the first tile and say 6 crack.
A discard must be named. Allow me to demonstrate.
Two dot.
Green. In America, we've changed the names up a bit of the tiles, and since this is a pick and discard game, you must, in American Mah Jongg, name the tile when it is discarded. So let's talk about the suit tiles. The cracks, dots, and bams are named by their number and their symbol. So 1 crack, 2 crack, 3 crack. The dots would be named 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot. No plurals are used, and the bams, 1 bam, 2 bam, 3 bam. The next we have are our wind tiles, and those are simply named by the wind directions, north, east, west, and south. The dragon tiles are named by their color, with the exception of the white dragon, which also can be named soap. So red, green, white, or soap. And we have our flowers. And our flowers are named simply flower. A flower is a flower is a flower. You do not add on the number or season abbreviation on the tiles to name them. Lastly, we have our jokers, and the jokers can be named 3 ways, either joker, same, or the previously discarded tile.
Okay, now this is a real big one that I find with a lot of players transitioning from online to in person, or there are people that have even been taught the improper naming convention of tiles. So I just want to point out again that when you discard a wind tile, you don't say north wind, east wind, west wind, south wind. You simply say north, east, west, or south. And the dragons, red, green, white, or soap, as opposed to red dragon, green dragon, white dragon, and the flowers as well, which have abbreviations for the seasons. There's also numbers on them, and I have seen people say 1 flower or some flower for summer because they just weren't taught and didn't know when they started playing in person. Any questions about any of this? And has anybody who's watching played in person and had some difficulties transitioning so far from what you've seen in the videos? Please feel free to unmute and let me know. You guys are quiet tonight.
Some people don't like to be criticized when you correct them and tell them, no, it's not north wind. That's how they learn, even if not online, whoever taught them. And, you know, they get huffy with you.
Yeah,
So,
and that can be a very sensitive situation because I do teach on a regular basis. I always ask the person that if I'm playing with someone, a lot of times I'll start a conversation and I'll say something like, I'm just curious, were you taught to name the tile that way, or how did you learn, or where did you learn? And I'll say, I teach regularly, and this is why I'm always interested to know, because I like to teach according to the National Mahjong League rules. And most people are, if you're nice about how you go about it, they're more than happy to be open to hearing about it. Certainly, we don't want to approach them as if we're coming across as criticizing them, which again, it could be, a very touchy little situation there, depending on how you approach it. But I always try to put on my instructor cap when I do that and be very open to listening to what they have to tell me, because it also helps me learn how other people are learning. I have people say, oh, I've only played online. I've only played in person a few times. Well, that's very telling, right? Or they tell me, I learned at so-and-so, and that instructor taught me that that's the right way to do it. And then I know that that instructor didn't get a copy of the Mahjong Made Easy rule book before she started teaching. So yeah, I agree, Phyllis. It could be very, very touchy. Anybody else have any comments or questions? So we're going to start now about pushing out the wall and racking. Now, there are no tiles for me to pick from that have been pushed out to the center of the table. So this player here needs to push their tiles out
to the center of the table at a 45-degree angle. And the reason that it is pushed out at a 45-degree angle is so that it makes it easier for everybody to reach the tiles. As the wall gets smaller when people are picking, it is courteous to keep the wall pushed up to the center of the table. We pick to the right counterclockwise. We push our walls to the left. So the opening here from the break of the wall is here, and as a reminder, if you follow the break, you'll always know which wall is supposed to come out next, and that is if the player put their tiles where they belong, which is right where they came from. At the beginning of your turn, you will pick a tile from the wall and place it in your rack. By placing it fully and seated in your rack, it locks in your turn. This is important because it then prevents any other player from calling a previous discard. Keep in mind, though, it is not a race to get the tile into your rack. So pause a beat or two while you pick and place the tile in your rack. Once you've placed the tile in your rack, you would then proceed to discard. So now the next player, who's to my right, would then discard and name the tile East. And then we would do the same here. This player is going to pick and discard Flower. This player here is going to pick and discard a South. And it goes around like that and continues until someone discards a tile that someone needs for exposure. Okay, any question about that little segment there?
I have a question.
Sure.
And I've seen this discussed online, and it happened. I've played 4 times in person, and everybody that I played with was kind of a beginner. But there's this stuff about picking a tile and where you actually put it, tapping your rack and then putting it on the table, or putting it fully into your, onto the slope. So can you kind of explain that, the tapping, that you have to tap the tile on your rack before you discard it?
Well, Mary, that's probably the best question that you could have asked just now. All right.
Okay.
And the reason I say it's the best question that you could have asked is because this is one of the things that is being taught incorrectly. And it is not just in one area, it's all over the country. I don't know how or why someone decided to say you could tap your tile on the top of the flat part of your rack, as you saw in that video, right there. I'm showing this because I want everybody to know the right way to pick and rack a tile. By tapping it on the top of your rack, it means nothing. It's about the same as holding that tile in the air and looking at it. It does not prevent somebody else from calling the previously discarded tile. That's why we rack tiles. Now, when you are an experienced player, you can pick and discard, pick and discard, pick and discard because you're doing it quickly enough. I mean, it should never be a race. Let's put it that way. You should always, take a tile from the wall if you're going to be picking and discarding, and not be doing it furiously, because everybody needs a few seconds to think. I mean, we all need that, especially as we get a little bit on in age. We just need a little bit of time. But if you're seeing that, I know it's challenging when you're playing with someone and they were just like Phyllis was saying before, when you're playing with someone and they're doing something the incorrect way, how do you go about letting them know that that's not the right way? Well, you can say, I'll call Debbie, give him my phone number.
So when you draw from the wall,
Yeah.
or the what do you call it? The thing that, what do you call it when it's sitting in the middle of the table?
The wall.
The wall. It's still the wall. Okay. So I pick a tile, I look at it, I think I don't need that. I can just immediately discard it.
Right, but I teach everybody to get in the habit of picking the tile from the wall and bringing it into their rack, and then thinking about whether you want it or not.
So you actually do seat it on the rack.
I do it that way.
You discard it. Okay.
Absolutely. And
okay.
I play fast enough where it does not prevent the game from being, moving on. When I put on a tournament, I think it was last year, one of the tournaments, I go over these rules, and this is not, if you don't do it, you're dead. It's not one of those things, but it's the smart thing to do because you're locking your turn in, and you don't want someone to be you don't want to hold your tile in the air looking at it. I always tell students it's not all that pretty that you need to admire it for a long time, but they're looking at it because they're making that decision. And instead of doing that, you sit it in your rack so that it's just like that shows in the picture there, and then you make your decision. So I had a lady
immediately discard the one that if you had just drawn that soap and put it in your rack,
yeah,
you could immediately then discard it.
Yeah, well, it's not like you're taking up that much time, but you're getting in good habits, and I'm all about getting in good habits. So at this particular tournament, I had one after I talked about this particular thing. Don't forget, pick your tile and rack it. Don't sit there and look at it, because I say this for newer players or first-time tournament players. And I had one lady who's an experienced player raised her hand, and she called me over and she said, I don't do that. I'm a fast player and I don't do that. And I just pick and discard. And I'm like, well, that's fine if you want to do that. I can't tell you not to do that, but the best way to do it is to pick and rack, right, and then discard. It's quick. It's all within a few seconds. My goodness, it's not even 10 seconds that all takes.
I think what's happened in the 4 groups that I've played in, and everybody's learned from somebody different, and nobody's an experienced player. Everyone says, pick it up tap it and put it back
No,
down.
no.
No,
Yeah. I didn't
No,
Get the
learn.
word
no,
tap.
no tapping.
I did not learn that from a teacher, because all my teachers, you're my teacher, and Michelle is my teacher, and I took online lessons with her, and so I haven't actually taken in person with a teacher. You all are filling that gap for me, but these people have taken with in-person teachers.
Yeah, it's really kind of sad what's going on. And I just, my goal is to make sure everybody plays the right way. That's
I think
really
it's
my goal.
important. I think that's important. I'm glad this, if nothing else, I'm learning this I'm learning a lot, but that's really important to say you don't have to tap your rack.
Yeah, I mean, you can, there's a lot of things you can do, to give the person information. You can email me and I can give you even some more suggestions of things you could do to help people learn the right way, without letting them know you're wrong, you're doing it wrong.
I know, and it's fun, and it's a game, and all 4 groups that I've played with have been different. I haven't played with the same people twice, so anyway. So thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
you're welcome. So now we're going to go on to calling a discard.
These are the wall tiles from where everyone will pick tiles. Your turn begins when you either pick a tile from the wall or call a discard. You can call a discard to make an exposure that completes a part of your hand. To alert everyone that you want a tile that has been discarded, the more proper terminology is to say, call, but you can also say, hold up, I want that, I'll take that. And if you're not sure if you want it, just say, hold up, or give me a minute, I have to decide if I want that tile. Here you will see another player has discarded a 6BM. You have your eye on a hand that requires a 6BM, and you are ready to commit to that hand. You verbalize your call and pick up the 6BM and place it on your rack, and that would be the flat part of your rack. After picking up the tile, you would then take the other tiles from your rack and place them on top alongside the 6BM that you called. This will now complete your pung, kong, or quint. To finish your turn, you would discard an unwanted tile from your rack. Take a look as the entire process is demonstrated.
6BM.
Call. North. Now let's just say that this was your second exposure and you are now putting up another grouping. If you do put up more than one exposure, it is courteous to space the exposures. This will prevent confusion about which tiles belong to which grouping. Right picks a tile from the wall and discards a 6 dot. And I need that 6 dot, so I say call. First step, pick the tile up from the table. Be careful to pick up the right tile, because if you pick up the wrong tile, there's no reversing it, a very big mistake, which would make your hand go dead. So I'm going to verify it, taking the right tile, and putting it up on my rack. I'm bringing up the other tiles that I need, and it is a pung that I needed for the hand that I'm working on, and I have now my exposure of my 6 dots. And if you will notice, the joker is nested between the tiles. And then I would proceed to finish and complete my hand by discarding a tile and naming it East. And the game then would continue to the right, because when somebody calls a tile, the game always proceeds to the right.
it never goes back to the player who discarded it. So if for any, so let's actually do that. We're going to reverse this and do it again with another player throwing the 6 dot. Okay, well, let's say this player here picks a tile from the wall and discards a 6 dot. Now I say call, pick up the 6 dot and put the other tiles from my rack up. You'll notice I did again, nest the joker, and then I would discard a tile, red, to complete my turn. Now, under normal circumstances, if it was just picking and there was no call, the next player to pick from the player that discarded that 6 dot would be the player to my left. But because I called the tile, the next player to pick will now be the player to my right. So once a call is made, the picking continues always to the right. So just think of it this way. You never go backwards. So unfortunately, when this happens, in this particular scenario, this player to my left missed a turn. And that's the way the game is played out.
When putting up an exposure with jokers, it's a good idea to nest the jokers between the tiles, or you could look at it as the tiles hugging the jokers. You can see an example of this in the picture here.
We're going to go ahead and do an example of that right now. 6 dot, call. I take my 6 dot up, put it up with a joker, and there I have displayed a pung of 6 dots. And again, notice that I have hugged my joker with my tiles or nested the joker amongst the tiles. Now that I have put up my exposure, I will discard east.
I'd also like to suggest that you slide your exposures all the way to the left after completing the initial one, and then any additional exposures can follow with a separation. This is done so that you don't make it obvious and put the exposure in the exact place that it is shown on the card. After all, you don't want to make things easy for your opponents.
Okay, any questions about this little segment? No? Okay, good. We move on. All right, this is a good one here. Joker exchanges.
The joker exchange process has evolved, especially in tournament play. It is important to announce your intentions and perform a hand-to-hand exchange. The procedure is required in most tournaments. If you failed to announce that you wanted to do a joker exchange and placed your tile on the table, assuming someone might know what you are doing, that could be construed as a discarded tile. You especially don't want to let this happen because you don't want to miss out on valuable jokers. The steps for the joker exchange are as follows. May I have your joker, please? You hand your natural tile that you have to the player that has the joker in their exposure. That player will then give you the joker and take the natural tile and replace it in their exposure. Watch how this is done.
4 crack.
Oh, may I have your joker, please?
You may.
Thank you. Please
9
note
crack.
that a joker exchange must be done after you've started your turn, which occurs when you either pick a tile from the wall or call a discard. regardless of whether the joker exchange is done after a pick from the wall or after you call for a discard. The joker must go into your rack to be used as part of your hand. In other words, if you call a tile for exposure and then do a joker exchange, the joker cannot be used as part of the exposure. The only exception is if you do a joker exchange and the exchange is your Mahjong tile, you may proceed to call Mahjong for the win.
Any questions about the joker exchanges? What's your experience, Mary, and on the 4 times that you've played so far in person? And anybody else that has anything to add, please unmute and let me know.
The joker exchanges have gone fairly smoothly, and just as you're describing that they should be done. What I just want to clarify, asking you, because I don't think this has come up. You had a banner up there to read, but it just couldn't quite go fast enough. So if someone discards and I want to call for that discard, and it might be a discard that I could use for a joker exchange, I'm effectively saying, I want your joker and I'm going to use it to do an exposure. So you have to immediately, once you've called for the discard, you've got to use their joker that you swapped as part of your exposure.
Mm-mm.
No, okay.
No, so when you call a tile from the table, you need to be able to complete an exposure with tiles from your rack.
Okay.
If you were to do a joker exchange during that same turn, the joker has to go in your rack to be used at another time. So when you call, think about this. Calling a tile means that you can complete an exposure right then and there by picking the called tile up and then bringing tiles up from your rack.
Okay.
You are allowed to do joker exchanges during that same turn. You cannot rely on that joker to complete your exposure.
Okay. No, I get it now. So it would be kind of a 2-part turn then.
It is it is. Yes,
Okay.
it is. It's 2 parts, but you can't, in other words, if you needed a Kong, you can't call the tile, put it up with the other tiles, and then say, I'd like your joker, and then add that joker to the exposure. Because it's actually 2 separate actions that are occurring. So you can't like take those 2 and combine it into the exposure. You have to.
So you might have had, from the previous turn, you had a 5 crack, for instance. And the player across from you does an exposure with a joker that's sitting in for a 5 crack. You're ready to do an exchange, but then you also get an opportunity to call for your own exposure. And so you could do those 2 different maneuvers in the same turn.
Right. As long as the joker goes in your rack to be used at another time.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. That's
welcome.
Helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, well, let's see what's next. So here are some helpful reminders.
Exclaiming, call, I want that, or I'll take that. Any of those are acceptable. Then pick up the tile, place it on the flat part of your rack, which is the top part, and proceed by bringing the other tiles up from your hand, which are on the slanted part of your rack. Remember, you can modify your exposure, add to it, or take away, or even change a tile that you accidentally took from your rack, as long as it is done prior to discarding. This only applies to tiles taken from your rack, and not if a wrong tile has been picked up after calling. Joker exchanges are performed after you either pick a tile from the wall or call a tile. When executing a joker exchange, announce it first by saying, "May I have your joker, please?" and then perform a hand-to-hand exchange. It is recommended to do a hand-to-hand exchange because if you don't and you place the tile on the table without first announcing your intentions to do it.
Now, I just wanted to stop here because that wasn't demonstrated during the videos, but it is another very important piece. But some of the online games do allow for the ability to amend an exposure. So I didn't include it in there, but I'm now mentioning it because if you have been playing with one of the platforms that does not allow you to add to or take away from an exposure before you discard, that is something you can do in person. Any questions about that? Okay.
Joker exchange, it would be considered a discard, and then you would lose your opportunity for that joker, and we don't want to lose opportunities for valuable jokers. During the game, be sure to space your exposures. It is the courteous thing to do. But keep in mind, you do not need to put your exposures in order. After all, that would make it easier for your opponents to figure out your hand. Get in good form by closing any gaps in your tiles on the slope part of your rack. This will avoid giving clues to your opponents by ensuring your tiles sit closely together. And be courteous at all times. When you are lucky enough to do a joker exchange, it is polite to ask, "May I have your joker, please?" rather than saying, "I'll take your..."
Sorry about that getting cut off. Okay, and then just some final pointers. And again, I'll ask if you have any questions. When you are playing in person and you're invited into a game, that group might have table rules. If you want to know ahead of time, ask before you join the game, because table rules add a little bit of excitement and change things up. They don't change the basic rules of the game, but they do add some excitement and some twists to the game. Now, the other, my sister, I was talking to my sister today, and she was telling me about a situation that just happened where they needed a fill-in. And they invited a woman to play with them. And this woman came in, and before, it wasn't even discussed before, which it should have been, but as things were happening during the game, somebody would say, "Oh, by the way, we do this. If you throw into 3 exposures, you pay for the table." And then something else would come up and they would say, "Oh, and by the way," and every time they mentioned one of their table rules, the woman would just be so furious. "Are you kidding me?" she would say. "That's ridiculous. That I've never heard that before. I've been playing for 20 years and I've never heard anybody play that way." Well, I kind of question whether she really has been playing 20 years, because unless she's only played with one group for 20 years. But the table rules, they're not that uncommon, and some of them are played often. Some of them are, I have to say, I've had some experiences where they've been crazy, but as soon as we sit down, the first thing I'll ask is, if I don't ask ahead of time, I'll say, "Please tell me what your table rules are so that I know." Another thing is, if you're going to be playing for money, a lot of times you join a group, and if you don't think about it and you get there, they're going to say, "Okay, we're playing for," or you'll see everybody has money purses and you're like, I didn't know we were playing for money." You need to be prepared about that as well. I'm sure I didn't get to every little nuance. Certainly, this wasn't about teaching anybody how to play Mahjong, but more about being able to transition between the online experience and the in-person. And I hope that you guys took away a lot of good pointers from this. Now, if you have not already subscribed to the MahjCon YouTube channel, please support me by heading over there and subscribing. Not only does it help me grow, but it also will help you be notified. If you click on the bell, you'll get notifications when I have a live stream, when I upload a new video. So it's just a good way to stay connected with me. Yes.
So I'm trying to convince a lot of my friends to start playing so I can have people to play with in person. But every one of them I've told to go to your 18 now lessons online. I have said, it is so clear. You are such a good teacher.
Thank you.
It makes so much sense. You go through it in such a logical way. And so I just want to let you know, I think you're really outstanding. And I'm recommending you to everybody that wants to learn.
Thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate that. You know, it's no matter how, and I sometimes when I listen back certain things, you know, when you're editing videos, it's so challenging to get everything right. Like even doing this tonight, and I realized that parts of the videos, the black box with the text stayed up longer than it should have, or it was blocking something and I missed moving it. So it's like frustrating. So, you know, I hope people do understand that it's a lot of work to get those videos put up there. And I do pour a lot of my heart and passion into it. I really just want to, you know, create better players that play by the rules and that excel in their game. Because when you play with better players, you get better and it's more exciting. Who wants to play with somebody that's throwing Mahjong all the time or giving you Mahjong, right? It's not fun. But anyway, thank you so much for saying that, Mary. I do appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions?
No, but I want to say the same thing. I watched your videos and I think they were great. It was kind of like a refresher for me. I played maybe 8 or 10, 12 times before COVID in person, and then it stopped, and I played online ever since. And this fall, we said we're starting up again. So I've been trying to refresh myself on, I've been playing online on and off the past 3 years, but it's not the same. So I did listen to your beginner classes and they were great because it just kind of like, oh yeah, you know, kind of a thing. And this tonight was great too. Just again, playing on the table, you forget how different it is than playing online. Since I've been playing online for 3 years now, it's, you know, call it, and, you know, the joker asking for the joker, you just hit the button and it just happens, you know. So I'm looking forward if you do the advanced beginners or advanced classes you said you might be doing online too. That would be great.
Oh, definitely. I'll definitely be getting to them. I've got a lot on my agenda with the MahjCon event coming up in October. And for any of you guys that have not considered coming, you really ought to come. It is just so perfect for, you know, especially, I mean, it's all levels. It's perfect for all levels because I have something for all levels, but the event is just very welcoming to the beginner through intermediate player, and the enthusiasm of everybody together is just an experience that you can't get anywhere else. It's got everything. So please, if you haven't thought about it, consider coming. If not this year, another year. You know, love to meet everybody in person that I get to see online. It would be great. Any more questions? No. Okay. If you're not on the email list, please don't forget to go to MahjCon.com. And, you know, I do want to show you real quickly a couple of features while I'm here with you guys and things that may be interesting to you. So I do have a button down here now so that it's very easy to reach me, reach the support staff here by clicking on this, and you can just fill out your information and hit submit. You can put what your question is right there. So it's just another way. I've also added coaching to my repertoire of stuff. So if you want a 1 hour one-on-one coaching session about anything, helping improve your skills, anything at all, I have this available now. You can click on it and then you just pick a date and I get notified that you have secured a date there. Yes, there is a charge for that. I do need to do some things and get paid for it. I do offer a lot of free stuff to the community, but this is also a business of mine as well. So I do try to fill in a little bit with getting paid for some of what I do. But there's a lot here to check out. So please feel free to come and look at the website when you get a chance. Well, I will have this after I tweak a couple of things that I noticed were in the wrong place. I'll tweak the video again and then I'll get this uploaded to YouTube. So if you have anybody that you want to share with, matter of fact, Mary, this would be a perfect thing to share with anybody that taps their tiles.
Well, that's going to be a lot.
But, that's a great way to say, to some of your friends.
No, I'll just say this is a great thing. Watch this. It'll tell you how to play in person.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I can't fault anybody that is transitioning from online play to in person because it just is a whole nother experience. But for those that are learning the wrong way in person, I don't know. I'm reteaching a lot of people. So that's my goal in the city that I live in with many, many, many Mahjong players. So
thank you for tonight. It was great.
Oh, you're so welcome, everybody. And it was great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me. Phyllis, thanks for being there.
We'll see you Wednesday.
I will see you Wednesday night. Good night, everybody. Be well until I see you again.